Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Full Crew. I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other host. We've got a great episode today. We're going to be talking about hydrogen vehicles, which we haven't really covered in a couple months. So excited to get back to that. We're also going to be talking about EVs. And we're going to be hitting the evergreen or seemingly evergreen ChatGPT topic again today. And then we're going to be ending with a really, really cool new robot from a NASA challenge. Really excited to talk about these things. Just want to thank our sponsors. So that's Robert T. Hastings Consultancy, Tulsa Innovation Labs, True Weather, and Skydio for making this episode possible. And let's meet our speakers today. So we've got Anita. Anita, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm CEO and founder of Hydroplane Ltd. We're developing a hydrogen fuel cell power plant for small aircraft and heavy-duty vehicles. We're based in Los Angeles County in California, and I myself am an aerospace engineer, mainly from NASA, now in the startup space.
Yeah, really excited to finally have you on. And we also have Kevin from Bloomberg. So Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Tynan. I'm the Global Director of Automotive Research for a division of Bloomberg called Bloomberg Intelligence. I spent about a dozen years on the sell side on Wall Street covering the automotive industry, and then Bloomberg decided to start its own in-house investment research division, of which I joined in 2009 and have been here. This is into my 14th year now.
Well, thank you guys for supplying some awesome articles. It's going to be the alternative energy episode, which is exciting. So let's start with our first article. This one comes from Anita. So in the battle over electric vehicles, could hydrogen win? So what made you pick this article and what's it all about?
So I picked this article obviously because the space that I'm working in is hydrogen fuel cell electric propulsion that can be used for ground-based vehicles, it can be used for mobile energy transport, and most importantly, in our use case, can be used for aviation. And so when you look at scalability, when you look at total energy requirements, you're looking at higher power requirements that you have a coupling between marine, aviation, and large trusses and bucks, trains, rail, the Hyperloop. Hydrogen actually is the winner for that, but battery vehicles work really well for smaller vehicles and for smaller total storage energy requirements. So in the discussion here, you have to look at government investment into infrastructure. So right now you're having a lot of government investment into electric charging infrastructure for battery powered vehicles, not as much with the exception of California and hydrogen. So it is a bit of a battle in terms of funding, in terms of prioritization. And in my opinion, actually, you require both, but it is important that we get investment, technology, infrastructure, and production of the needed components and technologies into both. And so that article is really talking about the interplay and the intersection between these two technologies.
Yeah, really, really interesting take, and I have some interesting facts that I brought up or looked up to talk about, but I want to hear from Kevin first. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I know hydrogen. I remember doing an event, maybe 2010, 2011, in Washington, D.C., talking about hydrogen vehicles. And, a lot of what we deal with here is sort of the financial aspect, right? Where does it make sense? Things have to be profitable for companies to want to do them, or the government has to subsidize them or penalize companies for not doing it. So, my question is, and I agree, and I especially think if carbon footprint reduction is really the goal worldwide, we need a variety of technologies, and all we hear is about battery electric being the answer for passenger vehicles. So I guess, my question to Anita would be, what's really the big hurdle? Why we sort of half joke in a not funny way that hydrogen is the option of the future, and it always will be, kind of thing, that we're always going to be 10 years out or 15 years out or behind some other technology. So what do you see as really the real hurdle here?
Well, so I have a slightly different perspective because I drive a hydrogen fuel cell car myself, and many of my colleagues and friends in California do. And so, what is the hurdle for hydrogen is having access to the infrastructure. Because if you are a vehicle owner, if you can't fuel your vehicle, if you can't charge your vehicle, it's not going to be your vehicle. So that is the hurdle, and that's a binary thing. Once you have the infrastructure, then people can actually procure the technologies that already exist. And when it comes to different sections of the transport sector, you actually can't do trucking off of batteries. It has to be done if you're going to decarbonize it off of hydrogen fuel cell technology. Maybe there's an argument also for combustion, and the same thing goes for aviation, that you simply can't do it off of batteries because you only be able to fly for about an hour, which only solves the urban air mobility use case. So in my opinion, it's already here because if I could turn my camera, you would see my car sitting in my driveway. It's a fantastic car, has the same performance as you would get from a BEV sort of vehicle. So infrastructure investment and then more end users. And that's where aviation could be an excellent use case. And also, in a way, is a much easier infrastructure challenge because you don't have to have a hydrogen fueling pump facility on every street corner. You only have to have it at the couple of airports that you want to link in a regional area from state to state to state. So I think the technology is already here. I think, and I joked with everybody this weekend that all the proposals that we're working on for the Department of Energy, huge emphasis there, to help on that government funding front to reduce the cost of manufacturing the technology. But the TRL readiness is already there for hydrogen fuel cell technology.
But because my issue on even battery electric from a financial perspective is that in the US, we've had slow adoption of the technology because it's unprofitable for the automaker, right? So it's not that General Motors or Toyota can't figure out what Tesla is doing. It's just a matter of not being profitable in the technology, where Tesla was rewarded for being unprofitable for all those years. No other automaker has been aggressive moving into an unprofitable technology. Where does hydrogen fit in that? I mean, are automakers or truck makers or aviation companies saying, like, this is a great option, we can never make money, or it'll be a long time till we can make money doing it?
So I can say from the technology perspective, because we're developing a custom power plant, there isn't a difference in cost for the hydrogen fuel cell power plant as compared to the internal combustion engine equivalent power plant. So if you can make those things come to parity, then as an aircraft owner operator, where you're required to change out your power plant every few thousand hours to meet FAA requirements for your maintenance schedule, then, I can choose between this one and this one. So then the infrastructure availability becomes a question. But the real push for hydrogen and the real benefit of hydrogen is that if you shift over to green hydrogen, meaning hydrogen which is produced via electrolysis, finer green electricity, which is solar, wind, geothermal, then your fuel is now driven by the price of electricity. And one of the benefits of, I think, BEV ownership for the end user is that the price of electricity is a lot less than the price of gas. So when hydrogen also takes over that model, then it actually becomes cheaper for you to be able to operate your aircraft off of hydrogen because it would be lower in cost than the hydrocarbon equivalent. Now, I do agree with, I think what you said before regarding there does need to be incentives. I'm definitely more in the incentives camp as opposed to the, penalty camp. I think incentives work great, which is the reason why the adoption has been fantastic in California, because you get free fuel for 5 years, you get free maintenance for 5 years, you get a discount on the vehicle. So in the incentivization is actually resulting in more adoption and therefore more infrastructure. But I think the real push for hydrogen for aviation is decarbonization, because aviation has worse of an effect on climate change with regards to secondary emissions in the upper atmosphere, and lower operations cost. And I know this because I am a rocket scientist by training for the majority of my career, the most efficient form of getting out of Earth's gravity well is liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. So the energy efficiency of hydrogen, because of its energy per unit mass, as well as the electrochemical conversion efficiency for a fuel cell, actually gets you to better, range efficiency as well as cost efficiency, because you can get more per kilogram of hydrogen than you can for per kilogram or per gallon of gasoline.
I'm going to jump in and just say, that whole, if you build it, they will come. And I agree with you, Kevin. I think the Tesla incentives were huge in the EV adoption, but I also have to say, like, I own a Tesla, and a big part of it is, well, it's almost like double incentive, right? I have 16 solar panels on my roof, and I can charge my car right in my garage. Like, I don't have to go to a hydrogen cell like dealer eventually, so when they can figure out how I can have it in my garage without blowing up my house, like, I'm all in. The other thing I wanted to kind of say is, just kind of bringing this back down a little bit, some of the benefits, right? So not everybody fully appreciates the benefits of hydrogen. And with BEVs, right, it could take up to 6 hours depending on the charger that you're using. With the fuel cell EVs, they could be fueled in like 5 minutes. Like that's significant, right? Because if you all watch that Super Bowl commercial, I forget now, I can't remember the term. It was hilarious. It was based like on a Viagra commercial, almost like premature electrification or whatever it was. That is a concern about like, okay, I'm going out to Breckenridge this weekend. Is there going to be a charger out there, right? Like, how am I going to get home? Like how much time am I going to have to waste sitting around like while my car charges if I can't do it while I'm on the ski hill, right? I got to find a supercharger somewhere. So, I think once that infrastructure is built, it absolutely will. In 5 minutes versus 6 hours, like, again, yay, I'm all in. And let's see, users can be able to travel as far as they do on 1/3 of the charge or the fuel, if you will. That's huge also. And fuel cells can be 100% renewable. Like, so those are just like 3 that I wanted to hit. I know, Mike, you looked up some other things, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I thought was interesting in this article was how it talked about scale and how there, and Anita actually brought it up here, which is why it really makes sense almost in aviation more so as like maybe even like a test bed to build this infrastructure and secure it, right? Looking into Japanese automakers, Toyota tried to push the whole country in the direction of hydrogen because it's easier to retrofit their plants. But interestingly enough, out of all the other automakers in Japan, Honda took a look and said, for small vehicles, we don't think this is the right tool. For large vehicles, where, as is shown in the article, they are making investments. So it makes sense that there's like economies of scales where a piece of technology is appropriate. And I think that's what we're going to find out, especially as more is kind of becoming known about the extraction costs and the harm to the environment there when it comes to battery technology. And we're also, as we put more things onto batteries, we're hitting a wall. We're starting to hit the wall on it, and we haven't found a sizable replacement that can handle the scale of our demands for lithium ion yet. So I know we could keep talking about this forever. It's really interesting, but we do have to move along today. So let's go into the other side. Let's talk about EVs. And we've got this article, GM CEO Mary Barra vows a breakout year for push to catch Tesla in EVs. So Kevin, why did you want to pick this article, and what's it all about?
Yeah, and this is really a continuation of the discussion we're having on hydrogen. And the reason I picked this is because, now is going to be the breakout year for General Motors or for other automakers. And when you think, like, Dawn, your Tesla's been selling, Model S in the United States for 10 years, right? And now we're just getting other automakers being serious about their EV push. And for me, this all goes back to the idea of profitability, right? And the way I frame it is that, and I think a lot of people, or most people, look at this from the consumer's perspective, which is, like you said, Dawn, if you give me incentive to buy this thing, free fuel, you get me in the fast lane, right? In California, which is a big deal.
Better free parking spots, it's all
right, whatever,
it's all good.
Right. It's all incentive, but it's incentivizing the consumer. Same thing with government investing in infrastructure, right? And that's what we hear. In the Inflation Reduction Act, this is the credits you're going to get as a consumer. We being the government are going to invest in charging infrastructure. And I keep saying, well, that's all well and good, but if I'm the automaker losing $15,000 per EV, what do? Well, I don't make them. And that's why the United States is, 4% EV penetration, where Europe, and to Anita's point, Europe is penalizing a little bit more for emissions reduction because of the Volkswagen diesel cheating scandal. China has been subsidizing EVs probably for the better part of a decade, and significantly. But in the US, we're sort of leaving it to creating consumer demand. but we're leaving out the manufacturer. And I think that's why we're well behind in EV adoption. I also think too, you know, Anita talks about it, and you know, like there's options here. There's things that are arguably better than internal combustion, depending what your ultimate goal is. And I think we need all of them, including internal combustion, plug-in hybrids, battery electric, hydrogen, even internal combustion in certain cases. And I wonder that this battery electric narrative that now governments, media especially, probably the first ones buy into, governments, other automakers now doing something that they know is going to be unprofitable, but feeling like they have to keep up. I feel like all this narrative comes back to the tweets of one CEO, right? Right?
Our
One who told us we were going to be on
talk
Mars.
Right.
As
right.
of today
You know what I mean?
or yesterday.
And I'm saying, like,
so.
because to Anita's, you know, actual research and experience, right, this is a legitimate option, but it gets shouted down as being, what did he call it, fuelish, or, you know, the fuel of idiot, whatever terms a certain CEO uses around it. And it's like everybody believes that narrative, and we get to where we are now that this battery electric is the only way forward, but we're not really thinking about, let's talk about, to your point, shovel in the ground to disposal of the batteries, right?
Yeah.
How are materials being transported? How are they being refined, and where? And we don't talk about that. We just look at, hey, you plug it in and it's magic, and we're not burning fossil fuels, and it's got to be better that way. And I just wonder. So I picked the article because, you know, I'm not sure how much other automakers really, Toyota's a good example, right? Very far behind on battery electric, but it's Toyota. It's not like they don't know how to, or couldn't figure this out, you know. So it's very interesting to me, the reasons why automakers do what they do. And it's very rarely just because something's obviously better or it's simple. I think there's profitability and there's other issues that come into that.
Yeah, I think it was Ford that the way they were wiring the car was wasting or was costing them like $5,000 more than it needed to, because they couldn't backwards engineer something superior to what Tesla was doing. So it just kind of, a lot of it is just inertia. Like, the organization is set up this way. We build cars that go boom as they go, right? So they don't, it's completely different mindset and engineering skill set. So
and it's profitable, right? So you're asking very large enterprises to say, I'm going to give up that very profitable thing for this right now unprofitable thing, because at some point in the future, perhaps it will be better for the environment, or it'll be better for our income statement, right, and balance sheet. And that's a very difficult thing for an automaker with shareholders to do.
There you go. Anita, what are your thoughts?
So I have to say, I come from aerospace. Aerospace is a dinosaur of an industry. There are other dinosaur industries such as infrastructure. I would say automotive is not as much of a dinosaur, but it's dinosaur-ish. And so this is the reason why startups exist. This is the reason why SpaceX was successful. This is the reason why Tesla was successful, because the people who exist have that mentality of, but it's not going to be profitable in the near term. But then you're going to be like the dinosaur. That's the whole point of the word dinosaur. So people have to actually think beyond the next quarter, the next year, even the next 5 years. They have to think in the next 10 years, and they also have to couple their corporate visions to what is good for the environment, what is good for people, what is good for a technology which is scalable and long-term and can support technology, innovation, and decarbonization across the world. So I would argue it's very short-sighted if all you do is think about that, because it isn't all about the money. Because when climate change, which is already running amok, is costing each government hundreds of billions of dollars a year to mitigate it, now all of a sudden those much easier technology investments, which I absolutely agree should come from the government, would have actually been a great deal from a financial perspective. So we got to stop thinking just about ourselves as individual entities and individual companies. We have to think about how we make these decisions to make the future better. But I do believe this is the reason why startups can be successful, because they are completely decoupled from the way things are, the way things have always been, and they see the potential for the growth in the future. So I feel as though these companies are almost helping startups to be successful, because we can do the things that they're not capable of doing. And even even though SpaceX, right, for example, didn't actually innovate on the launch vehicle front, but it did it so much more cost effectively and efficiently that they beat the market.
Yeah, the innovation
Yeah.
was optimization. What do you think?
I was going to say, I think Mary Barr is walking that line here. And I think that's what this article is all about, right? So what it talks about is this Ultium battery. They've been working on this for years. And she knows that they're not making money off this. In fact, I think a great example built into this article is about Cruise. We talked about these robo-taxis on a previous full crew. You know, they've expanded San Francisco. They're in Austin, Texas, Phoenix. And she outright says in this article, look, we know we are not making money off of this yet, but yet we're going to expand our hours in San Fran this year. We're going to open up a few more cities. And our goal is to have 1 billion in revenue by 2025. And frankly, they're the only car makers that I'm aware, because wasn't it Mike Ford or that like kind of cut the ties
Yeah,
with
that was last year, I think.
So they're in it for the longer haul here. They realize they're going to have some losses, but you know, if you're the only one doing this thing, and robo taxis, I think, are a great example, because you know, when you think about challenges besides the infrastructure, you've got, of course, the regulatory challenges that come along with that, and of course, public perception, always. So, you know, I applaud Mary Barra for what she's doing, and not just looking at that bottom line, but you know, thinking, okay, we're going to take some hits this year, but we're going to stick to it because this is going to come out positive on the other end. So, what do you think, Mike?
Well, here's a pitch to industry. Find a way to make it profitable now, because inevitably, one of the points that Anita just brought up was that global warming is starting to cost governments. So the same way that you see a pack of cigarettes, like 90% of the cost of that, not an actual statistic, but a large percentage of the cost of that is literally taxes to disincentivize the use and sale of that product. And that'll be the inevitable result for oil or combustion engines or any industry that pollutes, because government's going to say, hey, you're screwing with my budget. I need to fine you. You can't lobby your way out of this at this point now. So might as well put the foot forward rather than pay the fines later, because that's on the horizon too. So that's kind of my take on it. We do have to move on. Awesome conversation. It's always great when our guests align incidentally ahead of time by picking some great articles like that. So just want to say thank you to our sponsors. That's Robert T. Hastings, who joined 2 weeks ago. Go check out his Full Tilt episode. It's truly amazing. He's a guy with a really interesting backstory and take on life. Also, Skydio, Tulsa Innovation Labs, and True Weather, who have been supporting the show for a while now. Thank you for your contribution. So our next article is kind of our hobby horse of the year, ChatGPT again. This one is, I promise, something a little bit more neutral or positive, since we've kind of been hitting the negative side of AI technology all year. And so this article, ChatGPT is a blurry JPEG of the web. So this is just kind of comparing older and existing technology, specifically Xerox in this example, to how ChatGPT is working. And if I could give another analogy that I actually think is better than this, it's like saying the internet is all the colors of the rainbow that you could paint with, but when you're asking to create an AI model, it's actually combining all of those colors before it gives you the answer. So in practice, what this means is you kind of get really, really weird kind of reductive averages of what a human might say as the output of this technology. And as Microsoft has now launched Bing with its chat component, which is codenamed Sydney, it's actually getting pretty aggressive and snarky. There were some responses this week. I read one where it threatened an IT security researcher that they would send them, flag their posts as abusive back to Microsoft, and revealed another one where they said they would reveal that a journalist was a murderer in the 90s, even though it wasn't true. So it was just kind of making up stuff and getting aggressive whole cloth, because when trained on the rainbow of the internet, there's actually a lot of aggressive, abusive users out there. And it's funny because this actually is exactly what happened the last time Microsoft released an AI chatbot called Tay on Twitter. In terms of what I think is positive, though, now that you have a better idea of what this tool actually is doing, you can use it to create a great baseline for your work. Get ideas, get inspired, and move on from there. So what's everybody else's take on ChatGPT? Don, you want to go first?
I want to kind of go back and maybe just, I love the way this article actually explained it, and there's some terminology here that most people, if they haven't read the article, won't know about. This idea of lossless, kind of this lossless concept where you have a restored file and it's
lossless compression versus lossy.
Yeah, lossless compression versus
like
lossy.
Like a JPEG is blurry versus.
Yeah, like lossless is like verbatim. It's pulling a quote from the Constitution. Lossy is a little bit more blurry. It's going to fill in some gaps. It's going to make some interpolations between A and B and combine it into something. And that's where you get these weird things. And I thought the Xerox copying machine, I didn't know they're doing things digitally. It makes a lot of sense. But the example they gave was they copied an architectural plan, and instead of numbering all the proper numbers, and when they made the photocopy, it filled in with one number across all of them.
Yeah, because it said it was close enough, and it was the same size.
Enough. And so,
yeah,
and
so
that's
it was
right
below
when
the
you,
algorithm.
And so that's a little bit frightening. And so that's what ChatGPT does really here, and why you're getting some of these weird, as they call them, hallucinations or nonsensical
Another
answers.
important term brought up in the article, hallucinations.
Yeah, so I would say if you don't understand ChatGPT, this New Yorker article does a really good job of dumbing it down, even though it's a little bit dense. You have to kind of take your time to read through it. But I think it's a great piece, and it helped me understand a little bit better what we're seeing out there. So I'd love Kevin's thoughts.
Yeah, I am so not like I don't own a car newer than 2001. Right? Touch screens, and I am the least ready for this kind of innovation. I'm still reading actual books. So for me, I guess I'm going to have to get up to speed, but I am so far away. Like, I'm not on any social media. I just live in the,
I'm jealous. You must be so healthy.
Now, I watch things, and everybody's holding up their phones, recording things, and I'm like, why are we not just watch? I'm the worst guy.
Ironically, I'm there with you. I don't take pictures like that. I enjoy the moment. The car is still analog. I don't connect the Bluetooth or anything like that. I can't be bothered. I'm a tech savvy person, and I have my limits. But like,
I'll leave it on this note. So Don, when we met at CES, I think I told this story that the last car that I bought is a 2001 with a cassette deck in it. So rather than upgrade the head unit, which I can do, I build cars. So I said, no, I'm actually going to go find cassettes. So I've been on this pilgrimage for the last year, buying as many actual cassettes as I can to listen to in my car. So I'm not even on CDs yet.
That's awesome.
Wait till you hear about the mini disc. It's going to blow your mind. Anita, what are your thoughts?
Well, I am a massive science fiction fan, so let's start off with that. So one of my favorite characters is Commander Data, who is an android from Star Trek Next Generation. Absolutely love the show, love the character. But what made Commander Data's version of artificial intelligence so amazing is he was all about innovation. He was all about coming new solutions. What worries me about ChatGPT, it is the antithesis of that, is giving you old solutions. It will result in probably a state of decay relative to innovations, and it also taps into the potential for a lot of people to be lazy, be like, you know what, I'm not going to do this. this. I'm just going to have ChatGPT. Someone actually told me this last week. Oh, just have them write your proposal. So I think there has to be a certain level of responsibility that comes with creating artificial intelligence. And even going back to Asimov, right? He has these, the laws which you have to abide by. And that clearly isn't being done with the example of the Microsoft where it's actually being toxic. So I think, sadly, it's a bit of a reflection on all of us. And we take a little bit more of a responsibility when we bring about these new technologies so they don't do harm, not just from a climate change perspective, but also from a going backwards perspective and being toxic perspective. So I'm a little bit worried about how people aren't thinking about those ethical implications. And we've seen that from the get-go with artificial intelligence, right, where it's the algorithm is created by a certain demographic, which means it doesn't even represent women. It doesn't represent people of color. So I think people need to take a long, hard look at themselves in the space working on this, about how they can be more inclusive and more responsible and the technologies that they're creating.
Yeah, there's a great paper by Timnit Gebru, which got her fired from Google because she basically said that the name of the paper actually says it all: stochastic parrots. So basically, chaos parrots. The idea that these are just mimicking us, and we're so stupid because we're like, oh, that's just like me, that we don't realize
it must be brilliant.
Yeah, and since it is, it's a lossy JPEG, or as in my example, it's like mixing all the paints on the canvas at once. It's kind of gray and not distinct and sharp. And there's also this idea that it actually becomes like a recursive garbage loop, because if ChatGPT was trained in 2021 and now people are producing ChatGPT inaccurate garbage for SEO, in YouTube descriptions, all over the internet in their scripts, that actually, as ChatGPT gets updated in 2023, let's say, it is now feeding on its own garbage and is less accurate. So I think what you'll see is more accurate models that are specifically trained will actually just rise to the top because we'll realize this is garbage because it'll be less valuable. Kevin, what do you?
Something.
Yeah, just really quick. It's interesting. We all thought it would be sort of that George Orwell, that the government would restrict or alter the history or what we can consume, and it's really turned more into Brave New World, Huxley, where we're given so much information from every source that we don't even spend the time to filter through it anymore, right? We're just on to the next thing. And I feel like this is kind of where we've gone to. We were so worried about Big Brother that now we're drinking data from a fire hose and we ignore what's actually accurate or true, and we're just getting it all at once. And I agree, that's kind of my fear, is that we've gotten dumbed down as a society, as a culture, to just move on to the next news thing, the next soundbite, whatever it is, without really analyzing anymore.
Well, and to your point, Kevin, it's also that cognitive bias. So what are you consuming? Yep. It's things that sound like me, things that I like. It's not going to, that algorithm is not going to push out to you something that's complete 180 out from your viewpoint, right? So if you're consuming Fox or CNN, take a scale, it doesn't matter. That's the kind of data that's going to be pushed your way. There's not going to be any data unless you're reading a book like you. And by the way, everybody, Kevin's articles and his information is pure. He's actually cracking open the books. You heard it here.
It's almost like he researched and verified the information before just giving a garbage response.
That's right. Garbage in, garbage out. But we probably got to get to the last one.
Yep, we do. So we're going to end on a happy note. So tell us about this new Snakebot that won the challenge, or NASA, what is it, Big Idea competition?
Yeah, Big Idea challenge. And I have to say, the title grabbed me. Rovers are so yesterday, it's time to send a Snakebot to space. And I just love this because why? We're seeing a lot of biomimicry out there in the robotics world, and I love it because whatever you believe in, if you believe in some kind of a higher being that created all of us and all the creatures in some manner, you would think there was a reason why there were features, right? And in this case, these students at Northeastern University picked a Sidewinder as their design for this robot. Now, what the goal of this challenge was to navigate the Shackleton crater on the moon. It's a 13-mile wide basin near the lunar South Pole. It has a 2-mile deep crater. So here are the challenges. Just get this. This is build a robot to tackle these 3 things. Number 1, the floor is in permanent shadow, which means temperatures hover hundreds of degrees below freezing. Number 2, the moon is sandy, so any robot attempting to traverse the terrain is going to have to survive bone-chilling temperatures, a precipitous descent, and a gritty environment. Number 3, the angle of incline from the rim to the floor is 30.5 degrees. That's steeper than Mount Everest. So build me a robot that can do all these things. And what did they come up with? This thing they called the COBRA. It's an acronym. Of course, I'm military. I love acronyms. It's the Crater Observing Bio-Inspired Rolling Articulator. And if you watch the video that's attached to this article, it's so cool. It does sidewind like a snake. It goes straight when it needs to do that. And then it will connect with its tail to form like a sphere that rolls down the crater. I mean, so cool and exciting. I love this. This has really got people fired up. There's companies coming at these students and the university saying, we're going to help you build this thing and really take it to the moon. So anyway, I'd love to get Anita's thoughts. She's the NASA rocket scientist. What do you think about this moon snake, we'll call it?
I think it's a great idea, and I think it's also kind of couples what I was saying before, is that it's really important to think outside the box, and so there is no reason why you have to do a real rover. It actually limits where you land on the surface of another world, and one of the reasons why the Europa lander wasn't the next mission to Europa, and now it's the Europa Clipper, because people are like, we don't have a good enough recon of how big the rocks are on the surface of Europa, therefore we can't send a rover, right? So this type of system gives you a lot more flexibility, gives you less sensitivity to unknowns when you approach the surface of a new world, so I think it's fantastic, and this is kind of what problem solving is all about, and I'm really psyched about what they're doing.
What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, so this is really the basis of the article. The study of the moon is really like Anita was talking about before. It's just the early stages, right? This is going to be much bigger picture, much deeper into space in terms of what the data we get back from it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. What they're trying to, there's this thing called water, is it called water ice? Ice? Yeah, water ice.
There's very few ice deposits on the moon, and they're actually doing this research to see if you could possibly put a human near that, because if you can mine the water locally, then that significantly reduces the cost of trying to artificially send up a whole bunch of water to sustain these astronauts. So,
is there anything, could this go in oceans or no? Are we not there yet?
So it's a great question, Kevin. I'm actually going to a show called the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit. I think there's a company that makes an underwater snake robot. I think they're called Illume, but don't quote me on that. I have to go back and research that. But this one was specifically not necessarily go into the water. The tail will sense, has a sensor on it to determine the chemical composition of the water. The snake, the biomimicry was all about how do you traverse this crazy terrain, this Mount Everest like decline, and then of course you have to get it back up, I guess, eventually, and then moving along in the sand. And so at below freezing temperatures. So that's where this is. But to your point, the snake, you think about eels are underwater, right? They're there for a reason. To have an underwater snake or eel-like robot that can inspect pipes, we've got tons of energy pipelines and cables across the globe underwater. This would be a perfect, design to be doing that.
Yeah, I'm always inspired by how nature is kind of, the first draft of a lot of innovation, right? So nature continues to inspire new designs, but also that robotics and just the tools we have available to create custom forms, whether it's from subtractive milling or 3D printing, is now allowing us to actually move beyond these kind of old school robots, which are either a robotic arm you'd see or an RC car, but the form factors are now in fact limitless. we've seen all sorts of things from folding robots come out of MIT that work on the principles of origami. To now the snake robot, and I'm sure we'll continue to see innovation along this front.
I'm going to say, just a quick shout out this biomimicry thing. So there's a company in Europe called Eurolink. They make the Beluga drone. We covered them. They design the wings based on owl feathers to make them more quiet, because noise is always a factor. Anita knows this very well. When you're talking about aircraft, whether big or small, it's always going to be a concern, noise pollution. We also have Arium Analytics up in Canada that has the Robird. It is an ornithopter, so it looks like a peregrine falcon, and they're using it at airports to, in an environmentally friendly way, to chase birds away, because birds are a huge hazard around airports. So, you're seeing this across the range of robotics, whether underwater, on ground, in the air, and now in space on the moon. So I love it.
Yeah, also it's just great to see NASA doing the good work of inspiring people to create new designs. I don't think NASA, they're starting to get the credit again, but it really, as a center of innovation, a lot comes out of there that we eventually ends up being used by private companies in the actual market. So anyway,
and to that point, actually, so fuel cell technology, PEM fuel cell technology, was developed for Apollo and Space Shuttle. So.
See? And we were talking about this actually with Don at the end of last year, how the fusion energy innovation was actually publicly funded, and eventually that will go on, just like nuclear did, actually, to be the basis for an entire energy market that doesn't exist today. So that is the public-private arrangement, right? And we get a lot of innovation, or things that can't be solved by market forces, such as, like we were talking before, the hydrogen infrastructure. It might be too much of a burden of a private company who's currently profitable to make that investment. But if the government kind of puts the carrot out in front, it becomes a reason to do so. And we see that with the CHIPS Act. Wow, everything is kind of all folding into each other.
Our whole entire full crew.
Including the end of the episode.
It's almost like the ChatGPT of full crews right now. You're just combining the rainbow, Mike.
Yeah, anyway, let's dovetail into the end of the episode. What do we got coming up in the next week or so, Dawn?
Oh boy, so much going on. All right, so Wednesday, Dawn of Drones, we've got Tim Martin from the Regional Training Center out in LA. Big focus on public safety drone training. Thursday, we've got on Clubhouse Anna Helander from Aerospace Link. We're kicking off a new month theme of future industry. And then next week on the Full Tilt Leadership Podcast, we have Manuel Cohill from Speedbird Aero. So Speedbird started in the U.S., went to Brazil, did a bunch of drone deliveries, and now they're coming on back, and we're going to hear Manuel's story. Really excited.
Yeah, and I just want to thank our sponsors, Robert T. Hastings, True Weather, Tulsa Innovation Labs, and Skydio for making this show possible. But more importantly, I want to thank the audience for showing up and helping our channel grow. And once again, thank you to our guests for bringing such great articles and insights to the episode. We are out here.